All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes, and we look at theories of everything and other great magnum opuses from obscure authors and ancient authors, and things that have influenced me in my researches and helped me that you might not know about, or if you do, maybe you don't know about them in enough detail. We're trying to give a deep dive on things. And today is our 368th video that we've done on Dewey B. Larson and his reciprocal system of theory. Mr. Larson was an engineer who lived in the 20th century. Around 1959, he proposed his two fundamental postulates about how the most succinct version that he had of how the universe operates. And then he took those two postulates and he elaborated them through a process of deduction into his theoretical universe, which was, if these postulates are correct, then it would create a universe that looks like this. And then he compared his universe, his theoretical universe, purely from theory, with the so-called actual universe that the scientists had measured and observed over the centuries. And it's an interesting study in that Mr. Larson was really able to create a theoretical universe that almost precisely matches the real universe, down to being able to predict the basic properties of matter, such as the melting point and the compressibility and the specific heat and all kinds of data that scientists had observed in their laboratories, scientific tables. That's all in a book that Larson has called Basic Properties of Matter, which we're about to go through sometime pretty soon. Today, we're looking at an article that was written by Daniel Phoenix III, again, who is Dr. Bruce Perrett. That's just a pseudonym. And Daniel, or Bruce, was a researcher who followed Mr. Larson and revised some of his work, put out what he called RS2, the Reciprocal System 2. He uses the term, the name Daniel when he writes in a more speculative vein. He has many articles under Bruce Perrett that are more, orthodox Larsonian. When he writes under the name of Daniel, they're more maybe conspiracy-minded, or, Daniel was a person that claimed to have been working on the Montauk Project, which was a top-secret government black op that was done out in Long Island back in the early 80s. It was a time travel experiment that went bad, and Daniel claims to have been one of the computer programmers on that. There were a lot of other people that were there too that wrote about it. Also, another term that could be relevant is the Philadelphia experiment. And so we're going to look at his paper that's called The Nature of Truth and How to Manipulate It. Just to give you maybe the text and maybe even without a description of Larson's two fundamental postulates. The first postulate, and by far the more important, is that we live in a universe that is made out of one component, motion, existing in 3 dimensions, in discrete units, and with 2 reciprocal aspects, space and time. And then the second postulate is that the universe conforms to the relations of ordinary commutative mathematics, its primary magnitudes are absolute, and its geometry is Euclidean. Now, Dr. Perret had a little bit of problem with the second postulate, and he proposed a different postulate that contained projective geometry instead of Euclidean geometry, and also left out those terms commutative and absolute, primary magnitudes. And but the first postulate is more important. The universe is made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. Motion is basically a fraction, with space or time as the numerator and time or space as the denominator. Motion has kind of three basic aspects, or space and time, really, as motion. Space and time do not exist in and of themselves. They only exist together in motion. And they both have three dimensions, what Larson calls coordinate time, coordinate space, because they both have the same qualities as reciprocals. Reciprocals have the same qualities. They multiply to be one, and they also are both progressing. This is what Larson calls a scalar motion. A scalar motion is a motion that has a magnitude, but it has no specific direction. And you can model this using a balloon with dots on it. If you blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other. But they're not moving in any specific direction. And time works the same way. Time is always getting later and later and later and later. But it is not moving in any specific direction. So that is what Larson calls scalar motion. A motion without a magnitude, but with with a magnitude and without a direction. Larson calls this clock time and clock space. So there's coordinate time and there's clock time. There's coordinate space and there's clock space. And they both come only in discrete units. There is a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. You have to have a full unit before you have anything. And if you have one full unit of space in one full unit of time, you have the speed of light. Speed being time over space. Space divided by time. The car is moving 12 miles an hour. 12 miles of space in 1 hour of time. Space over time. Speed is one unit of space in 1 unit of time. Larson refers to this as unit speed. 1 over 1 equals 1. And this is the background speed of Larson's universe. So when you have a universe at complete rest, a featureless uniformity or nothingness, you have motion outward in all directions at the speed of light. Larson refers to this as the progression of the natural reference system. So this is the ether, or the origin, the 0 point, the reference point of Larson's universe. And then you can be displaced plus or minus that, and that moves you into one of the two sectors of the universe. The material sector, which is moving slower than the speed of light, and the cosmic sector, which is moving faster than the speed of light. The material sector is, what we're accustomed to dealing with. The cosmic sector, not so much. The cosmic sector has coordinate time, 3 dimensions of time, and clock space. The clock is always, space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. The cosmic sector is where we get things such as mental phenomena and life phenomena. Ethical phenomena is kind of a combination. Life phenomena is a combination of the two, and ethical phenomena also. So that's just the basics of the reciprocal system. Some of that will come into play here as we talk about Daniel's paper, The Nature of Truth and How to Manipulate It. Daniel Phoenix 3. What is truth? Truth is one of those peculiar concepts that cannot be precisely defined. The typical dictionary will state, quote, conformity with fact or reality. So you look up fact and find out that it is any something that is true, and end up running in circles. And we all know that reality is just an illusion anyway. Truth, so-called, derives from the Latin veritas, a concept that means verifiable, something that actually exists as experience or observation. What people miss is that opinion often masquerades as truth. So how do these two get mixed up? We obtain information on the world about us from two sources: our sensations, the spatial senses, and our intuition, the temporal senses or time senses. Sensation is valued by thinking, and intuition is valued by feeling. This is a classic Jungian concept of rational and irrational valuing. Valuing itself is just how important we determine something to be, typically based on ego gratification. We give the highest value to things that make us feel good and give us power. So when it comes down to that juicy, fatty Brontosaurus burger or a tofu latte, I know what I will choose. And here he's got a picture of Fred Flintstone eating a Brontosaurus burger. Okay, so because all the information we receive from space and time are weighed and valued by personal needs and experiences, we can never see the truth. So truth is always subjective, based on our extensive system of values, termed a Weltanschauung. My German is a little bit rusty, but that also means worldview. If you believe truth is objective, consider that mankind cannot even decide on the shape of the world. Flat, round, flat again, oblate, spheroid, geoid, hypersphere, n-dimensional membrane, whatever happens to be in vogue this year. The worldview is like a gigantic puzzle inside our minds with pieces missing and a bunch of them in the wrong place, because we don't really know what connects them to other sections. We've hooked together some bits of sky, that pond and that tree over in the field, because it was obvious those puzzle pieces belong together. But the holes between what we've assembled, that is what we seek to fill by searching for truth. And we will only accept the truth pieces that actually fit into the dents and wiggles of the pieces we've already assembled. Many times we encounter puzzle pieces that don't seem to fit anywhere, so we reject them as falsehoods, even though they may not be. In this disinformation age, the pieces we've already assembled were handed to us, pre-assembled, by those that wish to control what we seek when searching for the truth. Sometimes we have to rip out whole sections of our puzzle because we just tried to place a skyscraper into a seascape. And no matter how we try, we'll never find the connecting pieces because they do not exist. But that never stops people from looking, and more importantly, inventing pieces to fit. Okay, this section is called Layers of Truth. There is another way we can fill in our gap-ridden worldview by stacking puzzles one on top of another. That way, if we have a hole in ours, we might be able to see the answer deeper down at a different level. This onion skin wrapping of values is well known in psychology, and there are 5 primary levels. 1, the personal worldview, which is built from the experiences and observations of this life and the carryover from past incarnations. karma, unfinished business, etc. Choices made from our personal worldview are considered to be free will choices. 2. The familial worldview that we inherited from our family and friends, normally taught to us at an early age as the, quote, acceptable behavior we refer to as morality. 3. The cultural worldview, the generational knowledge of the culture we were raised within that is primarily a spiritual or religious worldview from which we pattern our ethical behavior. 4. The societal worldview, a body of proper behavior that is dictated by those who rule us to create social interactions with specific outcomes, laws for the body, codes of conduct for the mind. And 5, the species worldview, inherent in our biology and archetypal makeup that come with just being human, forming our instinctual behavior. When all else fails, the buck stops here and we react instinctively rather than act based on what we've learned. The species worldview is the only complete worldview, no holes. And then he has a graph here and includes in the subconscious the personal worldview and the familial worldview, and as unconscious the cultural, the societal, and the species worldview. Prior to the 20th century, the personal worldview was extensive, one huge puzzle with many pieces filled in, as mankind was still curious about the world around him and engaged in extensive research, observing nature and trying to duplicate what nature was doing to understand how it worked. Researchers of that era had a difficult time obtaining and sharing information, as the communication technology we now have did not exist. No phones, internet, television, radio, talk shows, YouTube, etc. They were limited to a somewhat unreliable postal service with international correspondence is almost impossible. Letters would take weeks or months to arrive if they got there at all. The 1950s brought the popularization of radio and television, and the familial worldview began to fill in. Worldviews could now be shared with many people as stories. Families would sit together to listen to a radio play or watch The Honeymooners on the television and tended to all watch the same shows. So behavior moved into the familial worldview and out of the personal. It wasn't because you wanted something this way, it was the way the family did it. In the United States, a melting pot of culture, the cultural worldview never had much hold in the psyche because the United States never developed a cultural identity, and immigrants were tending to flee the cultures they had lived in. In the monoculture, people's religion tended to be the controlling factor that is manipulated by those that run the churches, the first level of control of the powers that be. The societal worldview is the most significant one, as mankind is a very social creature and needs a fixed set of rules for society interaction that crosses cultural and familial boundaries. And someone needs to write those rules, and those that made the rules became the rulers of society. Originally the royalty, and now the New World Order. The species worldview has remained fairly constant, but only provides the instinctual parts of the puzzle. how we behave when we do not have learned behavior to fall back on. Because instinct is the basis of the survival mechanism, an inability to value at this level will normally result in death. Now that we see how things stack up, it becomes a fairly simple matter to manipulate what fits into a person's collective worldview, their truth, in quotes. This section is called What You Cannot Control, Destroy. The personal and familial worldviews are normally subconscious, that fuzzy area between active consciousness and the reactive unconscious. As such, they are difficult to modify because they are protected by the ego. We all know how difficult it is to change someone's mind, particularly if they highly value the point in question. This also applies to the familial worldview, as the group ego will protect the morals learned by the family group, biological or close friendship. The species worldview is biologic, so it is very difficult to manipulate unless you manipulate the underlying biology or genetics of the species in question. Mankind has gotten to the point, but still lacks sufficient understanding of the system to effectively exploit it. We lack the 3D time concept of the mind. The cultural and societal worldviews are behaviors that are taught by religious/spiritual and political institutions. As such, they are the easiest to manipulate through propaganda and marketing campaigns. But in order to reach them, one must get past the personal and familial worldviews. What you cannot control, you destroy. They must go, so the powers that be can get the power they want. Religion and politics have gone hand in hand for centuries, and not much can be done about the species itself. So the first target up on the hit list was the familial worldview, the breakdown of the family unit and preventing close relationships from being formed between friends. This started in the 1970s with the village movement, where it takes a village to raise a child, not parents. Add in daycare to pull the young, impressionable minds away as they only learn societal values and not familial ones. Anyone over 40 years of age, and I think he wrote this 7 to 10 years ago. Anyone over 40 years of age has noticed what has happened to the family over the years, and there is abundant material available on this topic, so details are not necessary. We just have to face that the conventional family concept and associated worldview are now gone. That left the personal worldview, what used to be called character. Life experiences taught us right from wrong, good from evil. In order to punch holes in the personal worldview, mankind needed to be disconnected from the experiences of life, nature. And this was done through a concept known as over-socialization. Move any personal values into the societal worldview by trickery, force, or coercion, and the powers that be control these values. The term over-socialization gets a lot of negative press because if people became aware of what was going on, they would rebel against it and make it personal. This is seen in concepts such as sovereignty and individuality movements, but it is becoming increasingly rare because the tools used to suppress individuality are the ones misinterpreted as rebelling against society. And these are the same tools used in mind control. Drugs, including alcohol, tobacco, recreational drugs, etc., and technology. Drugs dull the mind to the point where valuing must rely on the unconscious for problem solving, since familial valuing has already been destroyed. With enough use, the mind stops trying to store data in the personal worldview and defaults to societal programming, though the user will firmly believe it is their free will choice. If you notice, there are very few free thinkers these days, but many thousands of regurgitators pushing that share button without comment in an attempt to simulate an impression of creative thought. Technology has now become the opiate of the masses. It has removed the biological need to remember information and experience, with the result of blanking out the personal worldview. It is rare for a person to actually have an opinion of their own. The most common response given is that so-and-so said so-and-so. When it goes to so-and-so, then you've fallen through a hole in the personal and familial worldviews and dropped into the programmable cultural and societal worldviews. Truth by consensus, not observation or experience. This is not the truth, but a deception. What I am fond of saying, everything you know is backwards. When you want to push a person's values away from something they would naturally be attracted to, you present it as its opposite. So that pull becomes a push. The societal worldview is deliberately designed to present everything backwards in order to keep you from veritas, that which actually exists in nature and can be observed and experienced. Okay, this last section is called The Way Out. The bulk of humanity is happy being sheeple, being told what to do and how to act. But if you're reading this paper, you fell through one of those rabbit holes and are seeking to find some answers to life, the universe, and everything. To do that, stop accepting what you are told is truth, as it is nothing more than opinion. Engage in research, as the old-timers did, to find answers for yourself, and have personal opinions. And remember, veritas, observation and experience leads to truth, which requires the use of your body, mind, and spirit. When you are confronted with an experience that does not fit your worldviews, don't reject it because you can't figure out where that piece fits in the puzzle. Consider it, do a what if that piece actually belongs in this part of my worldview. Then how does it change things? And if the change is better than what you already have, make it part of your personal worldview and see what happens. The universe is actually a simple place based only on space and time, tending to follow Occam's razor. All other things being equal, the simplest solution is usually the right one. Truth makes understanding simpler, though on the surface it may not seem so because one has to undo so many falsehoods that have been adopted as truth. As Dewey Larson, creator of the reciprocal system of theory, said, complexity is entertaining. Simplicity is not. Give simplicity a chance. Okay, that is the end of that article from Daniel Phoenix 3, otherwise known as Dr. Bruce Perrett, The Nature of Truth and How to Manipulate It. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll be back tomorrow with another installment. So have a great night, and hope to see you tomorrow.